Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio. This is kind of like that farm stand, that farmer's market on the side of the road. We're that farmer's market on the side of the internet superhighway. So you stop in here and you get farm fresh goodies, all fresh Bible, 100% locally sourced, responsibly handled, organic, nothing added, no human, nothing added to it. This is just organic Bible, okay? So come on in and grab a bite. This is the Bible Bistro, where we like to sit down together and study the Psalms verse by verse. Today we're looking at Psalm 65, verses 6, 7, and 8. Those are the verses that we're going to read today. I said yesterday that sometimes I don't get to every verse, even though I try to, and boy, did I skip over verse 5. But we're going to see verse 5. Verse 5 is very instructive for the remainder of the psalm. Verse 5 said, "By terrible things in righteousness wilt thou answer us, O God." And remember, he was called up there in verse 2, "Thou that hearest prayer." So he's answering us. The God of our salvation is answering us, and he's answering us by terrible things, that is, things that are fearful. "Who art the confidence of all the ends of the earth, and of them that are far off upon the sea." So the confidence of all the ends of the earth. So we're going to understand what that means, and we're going to see how God answers in the remainder of the psalm. This psalm really is about him. Yesterday I talked about the man who's blessed, the man that's chosen. On Monday, we talked about the praise and the vows and the prayer and all of that, and, of course, then the iniquities that prevail. And we talked about going to the Lord in prayer for those things. Now we're going to look at verses 6, 7, and 8, and watch what happens now. "Which by his strength setteth fast the mountains, being girded with power, which stilleth the noise of the seas, the noise of the waves, and the tumult of the people. They also that dwell in the uttermost parts are afraid at thy tokens. Thou makest the outgoings of the morning and evening to rejoice." We begin in verse 8 to understand the terrible things, because if you look at your scripture, beginning in verse 8, you'll notice that there's this constant refrain. Thou makest, here in verse 8. In verse 9, thou visitest. In verse 9, thou greatly enrichest. In verse 9, thou preparest them corn. So you see what all of this from 9, the end of 8, 9, 10, and 11. We go all the way through, and each one of these verses we're talking about what God has done. So those terrible things in righteousness, we're going to find out what that means as we look at this going forward. But let's deal with 6 and 7 before I run out of time. "Which by his strength," who is the he here? Who's the his? The his is, O God of our salvation. That's who we're talking about. "Which by his strength," so this is the strength of God, "setteth fast the mountains, being girded with power." Now the mountains aren't girded with power, he is. We're declaring God's greatness. His power is magnificent and beyond what we can understand. "Which stilleth the noise of the seas, the noise of their waves, and the tumult of the people." So the noise of the seas and the tumult of the people, this is a metaphor. The sea is always, in the Scripture, a metaphor for the multitude of men. And so we have the noise of the seas, the noise of their waves, the tumult of the people. Those are equations. Okay, that's a parallelism that is being used here. The noise of the people is seen as, or is depicted as, the noise of the sea. "They also that dwell in the uttermost parts are afraid." Go back to 5. "Them that are far off upon the seas." Okay, now think of 8. "They also that dwell in the uttermost parts," that's who he's thinking of here, "are afraid at thy tokens." What are his tokens? Well, this display of power, the terrible things done in righteousness. "Thou makest the outgoings of the morning and the evening to rejoice." So let's begin. Now we'll pick this up again tomorrow, and we'll talk more about verse 8 and include it in our list here in 9, 10, and 11. So come back tomorrow. We'll look at those verses on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.